If you have no question, then I would like to invite our next presenter, Mr. Khurram Lalani, who is a CEO at Resource Future Pakistan. Mr. Lalani is also the founder of this organization based in Islamabad. He has supported project development, transaction advisories, feasibility studies, sector diagnostics, and market analysis for various public-private partnerships, energy and infrastructure scheme in Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, and Indonesia. As a consultant to development partners, Asian Development Bank, World Bank, FCDO, UNDP, and JECA, he has executed various economic and investment advisory programs. Further, he has delivered strategic capacity building and institution development projects at national and subnational level. He brings strong operational experience across several regions and sectors. Prominent ones include climate finance transactions and pipeline building for provisional government of Pakistan, team leader for climate finance accelerator, IMF extended fund facility at Ministry of Finance, public-private partnership transaction for the provisional government of Pakistan again, sustainable energy sector reforms programs, and various other interventions ranging from macroeconomic stability to subsidy agenda, regularity issues, and electricity policy and planning. Over to you, Mr. Khurram.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to this workshop. Real pleasure to be part of this gathering. My name is Khurram, and I will be speaking on the climate finance architecture. So I think let's couple of requests. I think let's just keep it informal. If there are any questions that you want to ask, please raise your hand, and we'll try and get as many questions as possible. I'll begin my presentation. It's probably not working. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Great. All right. So I think what you can do is that if you have a QR code scanner, you can simply code this right now. You will have access to this presentation plus a whole lot of other materials. You can also go to this link in below, and you can also directly access all the literature and this presentation. I'll just wait for a second for everyone if they want to scan the code. Shall we move? Also, let me know if this works. I'm not really sure. I'm trying it for the first time, so hopefully it should work. All right, we can come right at the end and have everyone scan this code. Sure, sure, we'll do that. All right, so I think there is generally a lot of talk about climate action, but more. I think Professor was just mentioning that we are talking about bold new inaction instead of really bold new actions. So we will try and cover the landscape. But before we start, I think there are a couple of things. First, climate finance architecture involves a lot of players, a lot of actors, a lot of agencies, a lot of stakeholders. Sorry. Okay. Sure. And so the idea is that don't get yourself bogged down into the actors and the name of the actors and the stakeholders. Just try and understand the broad-based architecture so that you know what is happening. And if there are any questions, we'll be happy to take those. So again, don't worry about the specifics, institutions, agencies, actors, and try to understand the broad climate finance architecture. All right, so what is climate finance? I'll just quickly go through this again. Climate finance is any finance to support mitigation and adaptation. And very simply put, this is the UNFCCC definition, but very simply put, it is the finance to support adaptation and mitigation work. And in terms of, there is this think tank called CPI, Climate Policy Initiative, and they've said that the world needs on an annual basis $4.35 trillion of climate finance every year. $4.35 trillion. And currently we are nowhere near to this figure. So just keep this amount in the back of your minds when you talk about projects and proposal developments and everything. The world requires $4.35 trillion per annum to fight climate change. And this is just a graph. We are somewhere over here, $632 billion. But again, the gap is the dotted line, and we require somewhere around over $4 trillion. So generally, understanding climate finance is relatively very easy. And I think people have made it into a very complex architecture, but generally it is very easy. Can I show you? I'll show you in the next slide. This is a spaghetti diagram. And this spaghetti diagram, we will try and make it look complicated, but generally we'll try and simplify this for you. So we're not going to study this diagram. What people do is they try and make look things very complicated. But essentially, I think what we can focus on is on three broad set of climate finance areas. One is the bilateral support. Second is the multilateral support. And the third is the domestic finance. So all that we are going to talk about is, three broad areas. One is the bilateral support, countries giving support to each other. Multilaterals, group of countries coming together and giving support to each other. And then domestic, whatever that we can do, whatever Egypt can do, whatever Morocco can do, and whatever Pakistan can do through their own domestic resources. So I think let's talk about the first thing, bilateral contributors. So these are the countries that are contributing towards climate finance or their share of climate finance. Why are these countries contributing to climate finance? Anyone? Why are these countries contributing to climate finance? I mean, why is Pakistan not included in this bilateral contributors? Why is Egypt not here? And the answer is very simple, because these countries are the biggest polluters also. So we have, Professor Manal showed the pollution statistics, and somehow these guys are the biggest polluters on planet Earth, and that is why they are trying to give support around climate finance, and they do it through different agencies. So, for example, let's just if everyone can see, I think everyone knows USAID. Everyone has heard about USAID, USAID. So USAID gives support. It's an intermediary of the US government. And same goes for UK and Germany and all other countries. So they have their different agencies and line agencies and their departments. And what they do is through these agencies, they provide climate finance support. So again, nothing very complicated. This is a bilateral country, one country giving support to another country. These are few of the bilateral contributors. I've just highlighted few of the important ones, but I mean, they could differ. We're not really going to go into specifics and really know about each of these agencies. But the idea is that you will have access to presentations. So if you want to follow up, you can always see these agencies. A word of caution, bilateral support is generally influenced by political and regional landscape. So right now, there is Russia-Ukraine war, right? Everyone knows about Russia-Ukraine war. And what is happening is that in Pakistan, at least, we get to hear that a lot of donor funding, a lot of bilateral support funding is now not available because they have diverted the money from climate to, let's say, any other agenda, to Russia-Ukraine war, to any other thing that is going on. So it is typically influenced by political and regional landscapes. All right, this is where the piece of action is. And this is, we have discussed the bilateral support. Now we're going to discuss the multilateral support. Multilateral support is where a large chunk of the action lies today. We're having COP on the sidelines. And again, COP is a result of a multilateral action. A lot of countries coming together, signing Kyoto Protocol or Paris Agreement or under the UNFCCC mechanisms. They've come together and they have set an agenda for themselves how to fight climate change. So again, when it comes to multilateral institutions, we have two major windows. One is, which is the UNFCCC financial mechanism, and the other is non-UNFCCC financial mechanism. In the UNFCCC financial mechanism, we have COP, and under COP, now there is a standing committee on finance that governs the overall climate finance architecture. And then under that, there are different funds. And the popular funds are Green Climate Fund, Global Environment Facility, and Adaptation Fund. So again, these are UNFCCC finance mechanisms under the multilateral support. This is specifically targeting climate change and climate projects. But then there is non-UNFCCC financial mechanisms. And before Paris Agreement, countries used to come together and really, that there wasn't any standing committee on finance. So they had all the multilaterals. They had all the 6 multilaterals: World Bank, ADB, AFDB, EBRD, EIB, IDB, and they all came together and they supported different projects. One of the biggest funds that they supported is called Clean Investment Fund, CIF. And under CIF, there are a couple of additional funds: Clean Technology Fund, and then there is Strategic Climate Fund. So both non-UNFCCC and UNFCCC finance mechanisms come under the multilateral. That is where the biggest piece of action lies right now. I mean, there's a lot of talk. We're also in the workshop, we're trying to make project proposal. The topic of our workshop is to make bankable project proposals. And we want to make bankable project proposals for GCF and Adaptation Fund and GEF. And that is where a lot of action lies. A lot of countries start trying to get a piece of action of these funds. All right, so I think, again, a word of caution. We discussed bilateral support, but a word of caution for multilaterals. multilateral support is competitive. That means that regardless of vulnerability, Pakistan is a very vulnerable country to climate change, but that doesn't really change anything. We have to apply and make good bankable project proposals to make sure that we receive funding. So the funding essentially is competitive. And what we mean by competitive is that they're not going to look into how vulnerable you are to climate change. GCF will not look into how vulnerable you are to climate change. They would know, but you would have to prove it that you are vulnerable to climate change. And whoever can better prove it through feasibility studies, technical studies, or whatever, through climate rationale, they would get a piece of funding. And I think, we have Dr. Sohail who could shed more light on that process a little later. But the idea is that this funding is competitive. So right now, the kind of workshop that we are in, this is very important because it will teach us to make good, solid, bankable project proposals to get this level of funding. If we don't make good project proposals, regardless of how vulnerable we are, we're not going to get into any funding. All right. So in terms of key players, we have these windows, and we have UNFCCC window, and then we have non-UNFCCC window. We're talking about multilateral climate finance architecture. So UNFCCC window, established in 1991, Global Environment Facility, very old facility. Then we have Green Climate Fund, and Green Climate Fund is probably the best thing in the town. Everyone wants to be involved with GCF. It is the biggest play in the town. And that's where a lot of action lies today. Then we also have Adaptation Fund. Under the non-UNFCCC finance mechanisms, we have Climate Investment Fund. And under Climate Investment Funds, there are a couple of other funds, and Clean Technology Fund, Strategic Climate Fund. So there could be a question of why so many funds? I mean, they're all part of the same game. Why do we have Green Climate Fund as well as Clean Investment Fund? And that's a valid question. Even I don't have any answer to it. I mean, what the policymakers were thinking when they were really devising this kind of an architecture. There are few differences here and there, but primarily there are also a lot of overlaps. There are a lot of similarities between the funds, and of course there are so many things that are there that people need to really comprehend as why there are so many funds. So GCF and CIF are two very predominant funds, and they have the same kind of language also. I mean, there are some differences, but essentially the same architecture. Why that replica? Perhaps the policymakers can better tell. All right. How many of you have laptops? How many? I think everyone has a mobile phone. Let's go on Google. I just want to give a very good tool. And if you could write NDC partnerships, if we could write Climate Funds Explorer by NDC partnerships. Let's go on this tool, Climate Funds Explorer by NDC partnership. It is also there on the QR code. So, but I mean, if anyone wants to just see the tool, and it would be good if everyone can see the tool right now. Climate Funds Explorer by NDC partnership. Is everyone there? You can see a landing page, NDC Climate Funds Explorer by NDC partnership. Okay, what it does is, this is a very good tool. I often use it, so I just thought to disseminate it, but it's a very good tool. What you can do is, if you're looking to apply for a project in Egypt, Let's suppose if you are an Egyptian water ministry or an agriculture ministry or whatever ministry, you could simply select all the options. You could write that you are an Egyptian government. You're looking to finance a project in water or agriculture or whatever. And then you can start selecting the options. And this tool will actually give you the funds that you can apply. So there are so many funds and people get confused which funds to apply to, what to apply to, and how to apply to. So this is a very good way of actually seeing what exactly are the kind of funds that you could apply to. And you could apply for readiness programs. You could also apply for funding proposals. You could apply for technical assistance, and it will give you exactly the name of fund that you could apply to. So it's a very good tool. If you want to explore it further, you could do it. But this website, I also have it on the QR code, so you could explore it more when you have more time. It's an open source. It's an open source. Yeah. All right, shall we move ahead? So these are the kind of screens that you typically see. You can apply. When you apply, who is requesting, and they'll ask you a few questions, but then you will get a list of funds that you could potentially apply to. So again, all right, let's talk about the domestic climate finance. And I think again, not a center of attention. Multilateral climate finance, the GCF and CIF are the major talking points. But domestic climate finance, what Egypt can do, what Pakistan can do, what Morocco can do, that's really something that local policymakers can decide. It is not talked a lot about. It is not spoken a lot about. People don't really highlight it so much, but it is very, very important. And I genuinely feel it is perhaps more important than probably the multilateral action. You could do so much because everything is in your hands. You could make a lot of ideas and things work when you're working in the national landscape. So very, very simply put, we don't have time to go into each and every detail, but very simply put, you have the national governments. They can use their budgets. They can use their national budgets. You can have your provincial governments. They can use their budgets. You can have the large national state-owned enterprises. They could finance something in adaptation or in mitigation. Then we have domestic private finance. And again, private sector is a very important stakeholder. And they could come into play and they could do a lot of things. We could do a lot of structured finance projects. Then we have large national corporations who could again bring in funding and financing for their projects. And then we have blended finance. A lot of people are talking about blended finance, public-private partnerships, and national DFIs and domestic funds. Just to give you a glimpse, I mean, there are so many domestic funds now. There are so many domestic funds. And I think President Biden last night announced a fund for Egypt. So congratulations to all of you. It is an announcement, I think, $500 million fund. So again, it is going to be a national fund and comes under domestic finance. So you could actually do a lot when you don't have to apply for funding and you write project proposals. You don't do anything. You just get into the piece of action. So this is just an example. I was thinking on the same lines, but I think this announcement has already been made. But I mean, come to think of it, if there was an Egyptian climate finance fund, how would you structure it? How would you make use of it? And there could be so many things to do. We're not going to get into details, but I think, personally, any national government could actually come together and think about what areas of activities they prioritize, and they could make a fund around it, and they could start pitching the fund to other investors. So overall, this is where we are. I just want to show you a few numbers in terms of the global climate finance. So I think this is important in terms of understanding how the finances flow. Now we have seen like three windows. We have seen bilateral support, we have seen multilateral support, and we have seen domestic finance. So let's try and see how the global climate finance looks like.